And without further ado, it's my brother from down under, Ryan Hartman's hanging out with me today. And the forefront of everyone's mind is American politics. And I just wanted to get an opinion from a good buddy and talk about how other places view American politics and what kind of images we're putting out there. And even though we both live in very westernized societies, like we've had a lot of conversations over the past couple of months. And I think it's a really cool perspective seeing like what other people who are, so to speak, everyday average citizens think about what's going on in the United States. So Ryan, if you had to summarize the U.S. election right now, what term would you use?
Oh, shit show, mate. I think.
You are not wrong.
Mm. I've been following it perhaps more than a lot of Australians have. I have a lot of American friends that I talk to on a daily basis and things like that. And of course, I think it's unfair not to mention that America is kind of our big friend
Hmm.
in, perhaps, militarily speaking and whatnot. And, it's a very important relationship to us. So what you guys do does matter. But yeah, following it on the news a lot in the last few days is, it's crazy. It's the different thing to what it is here, that's for sure.
Oh, I'm sure. So, what do you get most of the information about what's going on in our elections from like your local news or like national news? Like your media company is basically based out of Australia, or do you tune into American news sources as well?
Um, Certainly, it's a feature of the news here in Australia. However, I think most of the news that I get is probably from more American sources.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know. I tend to get up in the morning and I'll browse through the news feed on Reddit, which is a bit varied, and you're going to get a lot of different sources. Some of them might happen to be Australian, but a lot of them are going to be American or otherwise.
Yeah.
Um,
I do want to
but
pause real quick and talk about your background real quick for those who are watching the YouTube video. Tell people what's going on there.
well, that's some kangaroos getting down. I got this photo in the last couple of weeks or so from my brother who was playing golf. You can see his ball there by the tail. Um,
So it's a golf course for those who are listening, and you see like the green it looks like, and there's a golf ball sitting next to a kangaroo tail, but there's a couple kangaroos in the photo, but two of them in particular are in mid, what do you call what, coitus with a K if it's kangaroos? Yeah, just getting it,
I
just
like
just
that.
just hitting it down under, and
Coitus was the word I was going to use, but I think with a K, that's much better.
it seems like the Australian spelling for it, right?
Yeah,
I just wanted
absolutely.
people to like, as we're talking about heavy topics, to not just totally disregard the fact you have kangaroos humping in the background, which I love, by the way. I think it's hilarious.
And we were just discussing the fact that female kangaroo is clearly already with child.
Right? Like, you couldn't tell if there's like a Joey in the pouch or if she's just pregnant. But I mean, either way,
There's
it seems
there's
consensual to recreational at least.
yeah,
Like I
there's
said, I mean,
hope
they're
for
on a
something
golf
like that.
course. It seems recreational, so good for them. So you say a lot of the news sources that you end up following. So a lot of them you check out are for American-based news sources like CNN and so on.
Yeah, I mean, CNN news feed is on in the background in my on my PC here. It's on mute, and I think it pays to be aware of the fact that it's whatever news source you watch in America seems to be slanted one way or another, and
Hmm.
you got to be a bit aware of that. But it's sort of just something that's giving me, some updates on what's going on.
Yeah, well, it's also like I mean, I follow what CNN does as well. Not so much looking for the truth, but seeing as what are they telling people? So a lot of people
Well,
that do
yes,
go to a lot of these media companies as a primary source of information, and then you got to think, okay, well, like what are they being told? Like what kind of narrative, what information are they working with? Because if I can, like nine times out of ten, if I have a disagreement with somebody based on opinion, a lot of it comes from us having different sources of information about the same story. So if I can see like
yeah, certainly.
where you got your information from, what you're working with, and okay, we can probably find some understanding here by just breaking down what you're getting your opinion from, and here's where I'm getting mine from, and so on. Sometimes you realize, oh, okay, well, mine was biased, or maybe yours was biased, or mostly usually both biased, and the truth is
Both,
somewhere in the middle.
a- absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree. I think I think that's not. something that we're without here. I think there's definitely a slant on the news that seems perhaps a little less obvious if you're not paying close attention, and it's you definitely seem to get a bit more of a consistent story and more of a straight story and not this opinion. But it's definitely there as well.
Do you think that media sources do you have like the left versus right kind of bias in different sources in Australia? Like basically, do you have like your equivalent of a Fox News and a CNN?
Uh, Certainly not as obviously. And I'm struggling to think of an example. Um, I mean, there's definitely, news outlets that are owned by other companies that, like if it's Fox, Rupert Murdoch, Australian, by the way. Um,
Oh no way, I didn't know that.
he, yeah, you're gonna expect that, and that's probably the same case here, but
Mm.
I'm definitely not as much aware of it, and maybe part of that is because I tend to get more of my news from, other than my local news, you know, I look at more international sources because right now, for example, I am interested in what's going on in the American election, and I want to see which granddad's going to win, basically.
Right. Well, that's interesting too, because I talked to a lot of my friends who live internationally, and I mean, some of them know more about what's going on in American politics than some people I know here in the United States do. And it really goes to show, whoever, like America has a much bigger global footprint than the average American tends to think about. Because we have to, like, who makes policies here and who's in charge of helping make trade deals and foreign policy, it has a drastic impact on the entire world. That's something I think a lot more people
I
should be cognizant of.
It certainly does. I mean, not to say that, on any daily basis, I'm going to notice a difference based on who's president in another country, but
Hmm.
it's definitely important on a world scale.
Right, well, especially being
Um,
such closely knit allies.
well, certainly, yeah. I don't think there's a war since the Second World War that Australia's not been there with America. So
Right.
it's a very important relationship.
Oh, for sure. So would you say the average Australian, so to speak, like, do you guys pay a lot of attention to what's going on here? What's the finger on the pulse of the average Australian citizen? Like, are they concerned about what's going on here? Are they just kind of paying attention to it because it matters, or are they kind of invested in who's going to win as well?
There's definitely people who don't care either way, aren't paying attention, don't want to know, they're not political, whatever it is. Then there's people who are just kind of casually following it. I'm a bit further along than that.
Mm.
Uh, Um, but I think there's definitely people out there that have their opinions on who it should be. And they'll vary. Everyone's got their different political opinions here, like anyone else.
Mm.
I think, I don't know, I think a lot of people are a bit confused by the current president. Um,
Yep. So are we.
and how he can even end up there in the first place. But yeah, look, there's arguments that you can make for that,
Mm.
and I'm not one to judge people on their political, you know, opinions. But it's definitely divisive. I mean, certainly in your country, but people will argue about it here, even at certain points. It's
I was
pretty
going to ask
crazy.
about that because we know obviously Trump's an extremely divisive figure here in the States, but I was going to wonder if that same kind of polarization occurs in other nations as well, Australia, of course, in particular. Are people
Yeah,
pretty
he's very hard to ignore entirely. I mean, he's good at being on the news and saying controversial things that are going to get publicity and whatever it may be. So we were aware of him before he was the president. He ran for
mm,
president. We thought it was crazy. He became president. We thought it was crazier than that.
yep.
But there's definitely people here who would support him. And I certainly have American friends who do.
Hmm.
And I can understand that. Um, by no means am I a Democrat. If putting myself in an American's shoes, um, but yeah, I don't know. It's a matter. It seems to me that they need to work out some actual good candidates.
Right. Like you would think for all the resources and all the amazingly beautiful minds and brilliant people that America has,
And they're out there.
these are the options. I mean, of course, there was a legitimately good option with a third party candidate, Joe Jorgensen, but the way politics is set up here, with it being two major parties, it's just so hard to break into that game at all. And of course, they all
Oh,
have vested
certainly.
interest in keeping everyone else out of it, including the major media outlets that don't want to cover the stories like that. And the polling, I mean, the entire like organization that runs the debates, this is where most people hear about the policies and issues that presidents or potential candidates are bringing forth. The ones that run that are partisan as hell, where they're not going to, they set the rules to get into the election, to get into the debates at, you'll get a poll at these certain margins, but then they're not even polling people about these other candidates. They're just doing the main two. So there's no way to break into that public space in the first place. We're getting a lot better with social media and stuff like that, but it's rough. Like it's you think in a place that's so all about freedom, we'd have more options in who actually governs us.
Yeah, I agree. It seems the two-party system and the way it's sort of been maintained that way for so long, where technically a third party can come in, but they're always restricted and held back. It seems crazy to me. Certainly in Australia, there's two much more dominant parties, but there's certainly many other parties that are still, have to go through the same things and have the same opportunities. And you do actually have a choice. And there's also not this attitude of, well, voting for a third party is a waste, because I don't think it is. I get their point, but I also think that you shouldn't just vote for the lesser of two evils. You shouldn't vote for someone who may be marginally better, but isn't necessarily going to do a great job.
Right. Okay. We've seen in the United States what that's done. So we've had, I mean, decades of lesser than two evil voting. I mean, I remember like from a young age, and I know a lot of friends that were told this by their parents too. It's like when it comes to voting for president, you just pick the one that's gonna basically jack up the country less. And like
Yeah, and
that's
that's
not
not a great
freedom.
way to look at it.
No, it's
Yeah, there's
bipartisan
better
slavery
options than that.
for
Yeah, there's
sure.
better options than that out there, I think. There's smart, decent people in the world who are trying to do some good. And, there may be some of them whose politics we even agree with, um, but there is, I think, other options out there that should be given a little bit more of a chance.
Now, with the political parties in Australia, do are most people aware of all the different options that they have, and they just choose which ones based on which ones they align with the most, or do those two dominant ones kind of still control a lot of the narrative and not really give the same stage time, so to speak, to the other candidates?
I think there's probably a component of that. I think it's still expected that you guys have Democrats and Republicans. Our dominant parties would be Labor and Liberal, and it's a little bit more of a blurred line, I would say, in terms of like right and left. Um, but people are very aware that there are other parties. There's the Greens. I did notice that about 5 years ago, the Libertarian Party had re-registered in Australia.
Oh,
I haven't
interesting.
seen I haven't seen much from them since then, but they seem to have a very similar platform to the American Libertarian Party, so that's interesting.
That is
But then
interesting.
you'll have all of these other random parties. There's a marijuana party and a hunters and fishers party and a um, you know, uh, Australian Christian Party, whatever it is. There's a whole bunch of them. I think it's generally expected that the main two are still gonna be the ones that are in the hunt for a win come in the election, but there's a little less restriction. The other parties are held back less.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, how do the elections work over there? Is it is it by district? Is it popularity vote? How's it decided? So
Um,
of course here there's a lot of issues or a lot of back and forth about the electoral college and the merits and issues with it. How does it work over there?
uh, look, I'm probably not qualified to give you the whole rundown. There's certainly some similarities. We definitely have our districts and things like that. And it is a very different political system in that when you vote for a party, um, should that party then it becomes clear that they're no longer in the running, that party has nominated their next preferred party. So all the votes they get will go to the party that they've nominated,
Oh,
as their
interesting. Okay, so it's
and
kind of like ranked choice voting maybe here.
yeah, it's definitely a very different thing. One thing that I do like about it is a lot is that our elections will be announced maybe 6 weeks out. And at that point, people start campaigning, and then there's an election, and then it's over.
So it's not this full like years long thing where you're just the entire like half your politicians are spending more time campaigning than they are actually working.
Actually, doing like a first term president, it seems like they spend a third or a half of their term just campaigning for a second term.
Oh, at least.
Um, and yeah, it's just crazy to me. And not to mention the crazy amounts of money just spent over the course of that campaign over that long period of time. Um, that's something that I don't know. I guess probably Kennedy started that in the '60s. He started using TV, and it really changed things. And of course, we have the same transformation here, and then you add in the internet and social media and things like that, and it really changes the ball game.
Oh, for sure. Now, do private citizens, do y'all register with parties the way that we do here? Like, would you like, are you like you're
Certainly not.
okay? So there's not you just go in
You
and vote for who you want to. You're not like affiliated with the different parties.
you register to vote. You register for the electoral roll so that you're able to vote. But there's no part of that that is I'm registering as a Democrat or Republican or Labor or Liberal or whatever. There's no part of your affiliation there. It's only this is me being on the electoral roll.
I think that's a brilliant way
And
to do it. Because I think if you take away the personal attachment to these people and these parties, you would have so much less toxic tribalism that you see. And there's people on social media every day. It's like, oh, if you don't agree with me about this, then I'm blocking you or delete me. And if you're just voters, not associated with the parties directly, then I think that would prevent people from having their identities wrapped up into who they vote for. 'Cause, I mean, you see people
well,
like the point where they vote for someone and then that person has some issues, but they've wrapped up their entire identities belonging to that party, so they have to support this corrupt figure.
yeah, and it seems once again that's a part of it that seems odd to me. We register. I think I did it in high school, um, and you register just to be on the electoral roll so you can vote,
Mm.
and that's it. And then you go in and none of your affiliation or political thoughts or anything like that are part of it. It's just this is me. I'm a person. I want to be able to vote, and that's it.
Yeah, I wish America would adopt that. I think that's a very, very good way to go about it.
I don't see any reason to include any other part of it. All it is, it's registering, for that national list of voters. But other than that, um, yeah, there's no reason for it.
Yeah, I think it probably in the States, I probably should know this, but less likely that kind of thing, like registering with different parties, probably went back to a time before internet and communication, and back when
Oh,
the
certainly.
colonial days for sure, like when the nation was first really established. But there's a couple of things that are really archaic we've done for a little while that just don't make sense now and are probably actively detrimental. I think registering private citizens into different parties is exactly that. Although we do have a lot of people, I want to say in most states, approaching 40 to 50% have people registered independent, so no party affiliation whatsoever.
Well, that's I think an important option to be able to have.
Yeah, but the issue
Um,
with some of that too is so in our primary elections, when different parties are choosing who their nominee is going to be for these bigger offices, a lot of states, I want to say 26, around half of the states have closed primaries where you can't vote. Let's say, like for instance, for the U.S. election this time, like I really like Tulsi Gabbard, but when it came around for the primaries, I'm not registered as a Democrat, so I can't vote for her to be their nominee. I can only vote within my own party.
sure.
So I
And
think that open primaries, even if you want to be registered somewhere else, just having open primaries and more independent voters would be a huge boon to society and to the United States altogether, because you have people voting based on principle and not party.
yes, and I think, well, once again, I think that's a big issue. There's too many people that I've met, and not to say that they're not great, smart, nice people, but they've been brought up in this way where it's like, this is my team and everything they says is correct and everything the other team says is wrong, and I will never change my mind.
Right. People get so caught up in the identity politics of it, saying like, "Oh, well, I am this, therefore this," and it's so reductive to the nuance and beauty that is the human experience. Probably trying to summarize like someone down to what party they're affiliated with, that leaves no room for any kind of nuance or details or any kind of gray area. Like the world is not black and white. It's certainly not red and blue.
Well, it's certainly not, and you're certainly going to change your mind on any number of issues over the course of your life. You know, there's going to be times where different things are going to be better for you, and you're going to have different opinions. And if you can't change your mind, then that's a bit of a problem. You know, you need to be able to actually take on new information and learn things and say, oh, hey, maybe this is better.
Right, but everyone like, there's no venue for like forgiveness or allowing a person to grow and change their mind when there's new evidence that they're presented with. Because I mean, immediately you see like, oh, this politician said this, 10 years ago. Now they're saying this. It's like, well, I'm saying different things than I said 1 year ago. Am I a flip-flopping terrible person that has no integrity? No, I
Exactly
feel like I
right.
have more because I'm able to look at different information and be like, you know what? I may have been a moron a couple years ago. I found new stuff. I'm better now. But there's no route for, I mean, that's the big issue with the cancel culture that we see everywhere. Whereas like, okay, well, someone did something that was offensive in the past. Well, okay, there's a good chance that person may have changed. It happens.
Yeah,
I mean, there's
exactly right.
there's stuff that's been pulled up on my social media that I said or wrote, like, something popped up not that long ago when I wrote when I was like 21. And it was just like super misogynistic and like it meant to be funny, but like it was kind of funny, but a lot of it was just super offensive. And if someone pulled it up, they're like, Justin, what is this? And I'm like, those are the rantings of a frustrated, anxious, and depressed 21-year-old who has no idea how the world works but thought he did. And I left it up because I'm like, hey, I want you to see that people change. I have not always been
Yeah,
what I am now, and I'm not going to be the same person I am now next year. Like we're
I
constantly
don't think
evolving.
anyone is.
And anyone that
Exactly.
is,
Yeah,
they're probably not people that you would want to be around in the first place. You need to be able to grow and evolve. And we need to be more understanding of those who are in that process too.
I agree. And that makes me think of one other issue is that people need to be very careful of trying to understand people's intent and the context of things they say, because people can say things that could be entirely offensive in one context, but depending on who you're talking to, when it is, what it's in relation to, it can be a completely, different thing and completely inoffensive. But there's a lot of people that are very quick to kind of jump on any little thing they can these days.
What do you think motivates that? What do you think people who are like when we see the people, we all call them Karens, but like the ones who are out like looking to get offended by stuff, like what do you think is the underlying motivation there?
I wish I knew. I mean, there could be any number of reasons. It could be that person. It could be what happened to that person that day or that week or that year.
Mm,
Um, it could be they could just be a dick. There's so many.
right. Right, but your
I
answer
wouldn't.
alone like leads into another point that it's like I have days where like I'm driving around feeling fine, someone will just cut me off, and like immediately I'll be like quick to anger. Oh, you're just a complete asshole. I don't think okay, well maybe something else is going on. Maybe they had a bad day. Maybe they didn't intend to do it. I mean, there have been times I pulled out and almost cut someone off. I didn't realize they were there due to whatever circumstance it was.
Yeah,
Maybe I wasn't paying attention or whatever, you know? Like, I just think people need to be a lot more forgiving and understanding, because people that, like, there's some people who are out there just provocateurs that want to offend people, but you can usually tell when they're doing that. For the most part, if you talk to someone for
certainly.
longer than 5 minutes, you can figure out whether or not they're trying to intentionally be inflammatory, or if they're just may have stumbled into a minefield they didn't know was there.
I agree. I think, and that's one thing that people need to actually try to think about and consider whether that person actually intended. And I mean, you use the example of being on, on the highway or something like that. You don't get that opportunity to talk to people and understand it, but at the same time, people make mistakes. And yeah, just what's the point in getting pissed off at everybody all the time?
Right. I mean, if you're looking for things to be angry about, you're just gonna be angry all day.
Yep,
I think
absolutely
there's
right.
a certain element of like challenge and struggle that humans inherently need to be faced with. And I think a lot of people in westernized society in particular, we're so comfortable, you know. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. People work very, very hard to get us to this level. We also need to realize we should find ways to challenge ourselves, because otherwise we just go around looking for angry ghosts that aren't necessarily there.
I have wondered about that in a way, thinking, that people are fairly comfortable and certainly don't have the problems that they had 50, 70, 100 years ago. Um, are they bored without problems? Do they need to kind of make up some kind of drama? Not to say that no one has any drama in that, like everybody's got their struggles.
Mhm.
Um, but sometimes life's easier, and I just sometimes wonder if people get bored.
I think partly that for sure, but I think there's just some kind of innate human need to be, you know, fighting for something or struggling against something, or like persevering essentially. And in these
Yeah,
days, well, there's a Turner phrase. I don't know the origin of it, but I use it all the time. And I think it's extremely accurate, especially if you study history, where it's hard times create hard people, then hard people create good times create soft people create hard times, and this perpetually the
yeah,
cycle just continues
it's a cycle.
of prosperity into struggle into, you know, rebuilding prosperity. And you see this throughout civilizations throughout history.
I mean, I've certainly heard that before as well, and there's probably a lot of truth to that in some ways. Certainly, depending on what kind of scale you look at it, whether it's a
Mm.
personal scale or you know, your town or country or the world itself or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I feel like there's some struggles that we have in life, in the world that maybe, you know, if we stop paying attention to things that are unimportant or, you know, less important and just got on with things, then some of those problems would get solved.
I think a big part of it too is this 24-hour news cycle, where we're just constantly being fed the worst things that are happening around the world in our own homes. And if you're just constantly being fed all that terrible stuff, then you're going to think the world's a terrible, hostile, evil place. And of course, this isn't to say there's not terrible, hostile things going on. Of course there are. But if you look on like an aggregate scale, it's the best time
The
to
news,
be a human ever, you know?
well, every day is getting better like that. Technology is getting better, medicine is getting better. People are, able to live longer. It's always getting better.
Which I think is great. I
Um,
think that's part of that inherent human like desire to keep persevering and getting the next thing. Like that's a very important part. But it's just tough. We have all this communication that we just don't really know how to use very well. Technology has advanced so much faster than society has, and we're it's like when a toddler starts running, but like the top of their body's faster than their legs can keep up. I feel that's humanity and technology right now. Like we're getting ready to face plant because we're just advancing with all this stuff that we don't know the way it affects people. I mean, if you look at like rates of like depression and young girls once they get on like social media and stuff like that, there's a lot of long-term effects that we're starting to see from all these very new short-term use technologies.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, it's just in our life. I mean, looking at my own lifetime, people for the most part didn't have computers in their home. There wasn't internet when I was a kid, and then probably around the time that I was starting to get into high school, all of a sudden, oh, we got computers in the house and internet, and it was the beginnings of the internet. But then you look at it now, and you're always fed all the news, all the drama, all the horrible things happening in the world are coming at you constantly, all the time, and not like 1/2 hour a day when you sit down and watch the news in the evening.
Right.
Um,
And then too, everyone's reporting on the negative stuff because that's what gets the involvement. People are clicking on the scary headlines, or if it bleeds, it leads is a very popular phrase. And if it's something that will get people scared or angry, then you get that emotional, visceral reaction that they're going to stay tuned and consume more of your content. You can sell more advertisement, and then you can make more money.
and then I think on the other side of that, you look at like Instagram influencers or just about anyone on Instagram. They don't show photos of their life where all the horrible things are happening. You're getting constant shots of everybody's life looking awesome all the time
Mm-hmm.
and none of the bad stuff. So if you're in that world, then you sort of feel like everybody has a great life and maybe my life isn't that great.
Right. All these new technologies have made comparing yourself to somebody else like an everyday occurrence. But then like, we also have to realize that, I mean, like I'm not posting the first selfie I take every single time. I'm gonna wait till get one that I like.
Yeah.
I want
You
to
take
present. I want to present a good side of it too. But I think it's equally, if not more important, to show the real side of stuff too. Because I mean, social media is going to be an extension of who you are. Then you need to be able to see every side of it.
yeah, and when you see the 27th selfie that someone took every day, or hey, I went to this beautiful beach or whatever, and not, oh, I lost my job today, or I'm out of money, or whatever it might be that's a problem in their life. um you know and you're you as whoever's browsing through Instagram is seeing like all these great things that everybody in the world is doing, and then you're sort of feeling like, well, hang on a sec, why don't I do all that all day long all the time? But that's not how people actually are.
Hmm. But if that's all they present and that's all you see, and you make a lot of false assumptions, and it's so easy to compare yourself to that and think like, oh well, most of my life is garbage. Even though maybe you do get a great vacation, and, every now and then you could do the same things if you selectively chose those photos or use the filters, or get your makeup and everything done, then take a picture. Woke up like this. And the filters are terrifying. I saw Joe Rogan turn
Oh,
himself into an attractive woman based on his daughter's filter he posted on Instagram once, and I'm like, what? Like how can we trust anything these days, especially people like influencers? But yet they
well, yeah,
influence. The title is apt.
I try not to look at too much of that kind of thing, but
Right, I don't either. But I mean, popularity
you're always
is
going to
currency
see it.
now. Oh, it's unavoidable. If
Yes.
you're on any of these platforms, you're going to see it. And again, like people, like I say this all the time, people aren't communicating on social media is not a good way to communicate. You can get good communication out there, but for the most part, people are just like, there's like a dopamine endorphin rush you get when you see like likes start popping up on your stuff. I mean, it happens to me all the time. I'm not gonna lie.
Of course.
If I post something and starts getting attention, I will be just like a compulsively checking my phone. Like I turn notifications for Facebook off completely. Like unless I have the app open, I don't see anything. That little dot doesn't pop up there showing me the numbers. Because if I see that little dot, I get real OCD about clearing my
You
home
have
screen on
to.
my phone. I
Oh,
just
me
feel it's
too.
just an overwhelming like compulsion to go and be like, who said what, who liked what, who shared this, what's going on there.
Yeah.
And I have to be like, okay, step back, Tyndall, chill out for a minute, Bo. That's not healthy. You're falling into bad
I think
habits
it,
there.
I think, Facebook and whatever social media, it is a very useful tool. I have a lot of American friends spread all around the country, and that's one of the main ways that I get to talk to them, so regularly.
So we became friends.
But it's, well, it is, just in the last few months, and that's something, one of the positives out of
Right.
2020
Yeah.
is that I've met so many new friends because people started, getting onto these video chats and hanging out. And I met some people that I knew a little and got to know them better. I met new people, but yeah, I can't even count the number of good friends that I've made, just through, social media this year, because everybody's been sitting at home and maybe not socializing the way they did.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that's one upside to the shit show that is 2020 that I do consider regularly, and that I'm very grateful for on a daily basis, because all of these new friends, some of my best friends that I've made over the course of the year. And you can't be sad about social media for that, but it's, at the same time, I wouldn't want to just sit there scrolling my Facebook feed all day.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's a tool like anything else, and a tool can be used in positive ways, and a tool can be used in negative ways. So, I mean, we're obviously an example of the good side of that, positive effects of social media. But of course, we were talking about some of the negative ones too. So, but I really, really dig like that. I think we should wrap it up on the positive aspects of social media, being able to communicate ideas, make a bunch of new friends, and is there
I think
anything?
I
Go
was
ahead.
going to say, if you use the social media, for those purposes, to keep in touch with your family, your friends, people far away, have a joke with people, post up a joke. That's cool, but don't let it ruin your life. Don't sit there all day. Don't get into all the drama. Uh,
You gotta
Definitely
set
don't use it.
boundaries.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you've got to remember the outside world is the first thing, and of course, there's going to be important people and people that you like on Facebook, and a lot of things that are going to use up your time and have some fun, but go out and live life.
Bro, I love that. Thank you so much, man. I am really stoked to have you on. Thank you for sharing stuff like that. And this will definitely not be the last time we talk together. I mean, we're going to talk later on
It's
today either way, but I mean, on the podcast.
Of course, mate. No, it's a pleasure. I appreciate you having me on. It's always good to talk to you, brother.
Hell yeah, man. I love you, mate. I'll talk to you soon.
Take care.
I always forget where the recording button is. There it is. Okay, bye.